The amazing thing about this clip from Joe Rogan is while he's explaining why he doesn't believe the Bible is trustworthy, he actually uses a criteria Bible scholars will use to establish the credibility of the Bible. So I'm glad you're with me on this one. I'm going to unpack this more on the back end of the clip. Let's get into it.
Who knows if it was a religious thing? You look, there's people that have mass hallucinations all the time about a lot of things, and there's people that you could give them false memory. False memory is a real thing. Someone can convince you that something happened that didn't happen.
Right.
It's real. It's like they've demonstrated how to do it. We all know friends that have a memory of something, and you go, "That's not what happened," and then you say your version of it, and then everybody has to like figure out what really happened.
Right.
You know, you're like, "Do you remember that time we were at the game and you said this?" I didn't say that. Like that was not me.
Yeah.
That was Mike.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're like, "What? Yeah. You remember Mike lost his job?
Right.
He was drunk. Do you remember?" And they're like, "Oh yeah." Like you thought it was me. Like you put it on me. It's like you change things. Like people change things.
Right.
And so if this person was this significant religious guru figure like Jesus was, right? And he really does have this amazing view of how humanity can live in harmony. And he really does talk to people about this. And he really does preach forgiveness. And he really does like to treat everybody like they're the same. Paupers and hookers and everyone. Everyone's just God's children, loved. When that guy's gone, you're going to miss him, man. You're going to miss him bad. And if you really do have a fundamental view of reality that's based entirely on myth, and you have connected this guy to the Son of Christ, or the Son of God, rather, this figure that is brought here to save us, and the Romans took him from us and killed him, and now he died for our sins, and the whole thing.
Right.
If you have that in your head, and then someone says, "I saw him," like, "I saw him too."
Right.
Like, people see the Virgin Mary in a fucking grilled cheese sandwich. People see things.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean those things aren't there.
Right.
It doesn't mean that isn't a vision, but it also does mean that people see things that aren't. And there's a lot of people that are not that bright.
Yeah.
They're not smart, and they're easily led, and they're easily manipulated. But it also doesn't mean that Jesus wasn't real. The likelihood of someone coming back to life is very low.
Right.
The likelihood of someone taking his body is very high.
Right.
So if you use like Occam's razor, the simplest solution, the simplest answer is probably what you're searching for. It's probably that someone took the body.
And so what we have here, which I think is kind of fascinating, is Joe telling a story about how people will misremember things or how they'll have memories planted in their minds, and in that there's really a community aspect of this. There's accountability that a community brings you as you make truth claims about a given event. That's essentially what we're talking about when it comes to the New Testament and the gospel stories. These were written by followers of Jesus. They were written within the time span of other eyewitnesses who were antagonistic to the claims of the disciples. They were written and being told in the area of Jerusalem. And so the emergence of the New Testament in particular, but really the whole Bible, is a community event. It emerges from in the midst of a community, and the community provides accountability to the truth. That's exactly what Joe Rogan just set forth. If someone was to make a claim about Jesus that was wrong, that the other eyewitnesses saw differently, they come and they say, well, no, that's not actually the way it happened. It happened this way, or I saw him there. Or you have accountability within a community that establishes the credibility of the statements that we have now, the statements that are from the followers of Jesus that have endured through time. And so as I look at the New Testament, my thinking is exactly what Joe is talking about is what happened. And the false claims about Jesus are what were corrected. They were corrected by the community of eyewitnesses in the region where the events took place. And the reason the Gospels have endured is because they're telling us what truly happened. And the best explanation is not really that someone stole the body. It's actually that a miracle took place and that God raised Jesus from the dead. There's nothing else that explains not just the documentation evidence and the eyewitness evidence that we've covered, but also just the emergence of the church, the fact that people, they defended this truth with their lives. And not only that, for thousands and thousands of years, you have a community of people saying, I have come into contact with this person, Jesus. I don't know how exactly to explain it, but this is what has happened. This is real. It's the most real thing I've ever encountered. And so I find this conversation fascinating, and I did a longer version addressing more of this conversation with Joe and Chris, because I think that it's stuff like this that God ultimately uses to bring about a connection to the truth of the person of Jesus. It almost seems foolishness at times, and yet you look at it and you go, here's Joe Rogan, who's saying, this is why I can't really trust the Bible. It's literally the same thing that Bible scholars will say gives the Bible its credibility, because it was written in a community of people that provided accountability to the truth. So if you're interested in this more, I'll leave the link to the longer version of this podcast, and I'll catch you in the next one.